morning, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of The Morning Mindset Motivation. Today, I have a new name for you, Wallace Wattles. If you hadn't heard of him, he wrote a book back in the early 1900s called The Science of Getting Rich. In fact, there were several authors that wrote on similar topics back then, and one theory was that beginning of change in how people look at creating wealth for themselves was one of the kind of like the underlying reasons for the economic boom that took place in the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties. I don't know if that's the only cause, but as I kind of think about, there's another similarity. Here 100 years later, and that's with this pandemic. Back in the, 1918 to 1920, that Spanish flu tore across the world. Some estimates say that 50 million people died of that. And again, here it is, plus or minus 100 years later, we're faced with another virus that's, going across the globe and claiming a lot of lives. Now, that by itself doesn't necessarily mean that, the two events are related, but something about it, just like the coincidence factor, if you will, kind of got me digging up some of those books. I've read several of them, before, but I recently had pulled out this Science of Getting Rich. And if you haven't read it, I'd highly, highly suggest it. They're all in the public domain. You can find, numerous copies of them out there. One of the major kind of like the components is the idea of focusing your thought. Number one, you got to be careful what you choose, because if you're going to choose a thought, you're going to have to stick with it till you get it. They certainly use the examples of there's any kind of reason that you might currently have about why people get rich. It's probably not 100% true. Just because somebody comes from a certain background or have a certain education, there's examples of people that didn't have that were able to. Probably one of the best ones that kind of hooked me into it is if you take two people in the exact same geographic area doing the exact same business, you can find examples of one succeeds astronomically and gets rich, and the other remains poor and eventually goes bankrupt. Why is that? Well, what Wallace Wattles proposed was it's a science, is that if we learn to do things in a very specific way, it's kind of like cause and effect, is that we too can be rich. Well, anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great day.